Um, Kind of to kick things off, let's do the standard introduction in case people haven't heard you on the other podcast or haven't heard the music. Um, just introduce yourself and quick background on yourselves.
Cool. We are definitely maybe. My name is Courtney, and this is my husband Sawyer, and we're super excited to be back.
Yeah. So to kind of start, for people that aren't familiar with you guys, we'll talk about the music a little bit. You started blowing up on TikTok. That's how we got connected. You've got new music coming out, which sounds fucking dope. You just finished a tour with 408 not too long ago. Like, what is life when you really take a moment to pause and look at it over the last 6 months, 8 months?
Oh wow. It's been it's been wild. Um, it's interesting because I feel like the further away you get from something, the more it can start to feel like a dream. Like, did
Hmm.
that really happen? And you sort of wonder, like, who was that person that was on tour? Because I'm picturing myself now leaving for a month and doing the same thing, and I'm like, I can't believe that we did that. But I think overall, it's like an overwhelming feeling of being proud. I think I never, ever in a million years would have thought we would do any of the things we've done over the past year. So yeah, it just kind of feels surreal to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, it is kind of that weird moment of like, especially in today's world of ebbs and flows and all that, like, okay, that was really fucking rad that we did that. And now we're kind of on pause for the next who knows how long. So we just get to remember it.
Yep, exactly. And that's not to say it was all like up and to the right. It was definitely major highs and major lows, all in between. So it's been a roller coaster for sure, but definitely proud.
Yeah. That was a solid How I Met Your Mother reference for anyone
Yeah, thank
watching
you
this.
for noticing.
Talk a little bit about like that tour specifically because it was your first chance to get out on the road. You are very vocal about mental health. How did that play into your mental health and dealing with things as you still have home with you in the sense that Sawyer's with you and whatnot, but you're
Thank
away from home. What was that like, kind of starting that travel?
Yeah, it was definitely nerve-wracking. We've had some friends experience going on tour, and so we sought counsel and a lot of musician friends, and they gave us a lot of advice, and a lot of it was pretty cryptic, saying, you won't be the same when you come back. Band's gonna look a lot different. It's gonna be really hard. You're gonna be so tired. So we had the expectation going in that this is gonna be tough. So much so that about a week in, or maybe a week and a half, Sawyer and I looked at each other and we said, this is not as hard as we thought. I'm actually kind
Yeah.
of having fun and enjoying myself. I think I could do this. And I do want to do it again. I'm super excited to hit the road again whenever that happens. And I think for us, we got super lucky because 408 were such incredible hosts,
Yeah.
and I think I am a pessimist and I generally have a very low expectation, especially when it comes to full like male pop punk bands. I'm like, they're going to be guys, they're going to be
Yeah.
dudes. It was me and a bunch of dudes for a long time. But they are just incredible, incredible people. Their tour manager was amazing. They kind of scooped us up and took care of us. And it was such a supportive environment and fun environment to be in, which was amazing. And we heard from the 408 guys, we've heard from our friends that usually your first tour is not like that. So we know
Yeah.
that we got super lucky and it was amazing. And it's funny you mentioned coming home and how that went. So tour was easier than I thought. Tour was fun. You're kind of going nonstop. So you don't really have time to sit there and think about things
Right.
and ruminate. And so you're just kind of focused on the next show, which is for me nice. But then you get home and you're back to reality. And I thought I was fine. I thought I was okay. And then I looked at Sawyer. This was like 2 weeks ago, maybe less. But I was like, Sawyer, I don't remember the last time I washed my hair. And we realized that I hadn't washed my hair since like halfway through tour. And we had been home for a bit.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there and I Google like why don't I and I still didn't wash my hair that night. It still took me a few days, but I Googled it and I was like, why the hell don't I want to shower? Like, what is wrong with me? And then it was like, duh, like that's one of the most telltale signs of depression is, personal hygiene takes a hit. And I
Yeah.
remember sitting there and be like, well, duh, like derp, I am diagnosed, I am depressed, I take meds for it. This makes sense. And so I picked myself up. I washed my hair and I washed my hair 2 times that week, which was a big deal. So I was very surprised. But I guess I didn't really realize, and I'm still kind of learning how coming home from tour has been affecting us. I think,
Hmm.
immediately you get home and it's so nice to be back. We saw our cats. I got to see my family. I missed them, being gone for weeks and weeks, but it also is just such a different speed. And when you're
Yeah.
on tour, that's kind of all you think about is tour, is your next show. It's getting through to the next city, it's checking into the hotel. It's like very step by step. And then when you get home, you just have so many other things to think about, which is wild. And I feel like I'm rambling, but yeah, getting home from tour was nuts. And I thought I was totally fine, but personal hygiene took a hit, and I definitely am feeling
Yeah.
the saddies from getting home and not being on the road anymore.
Yeah. It's for the quote unquote, and I don't mean this derogatory, but for the normal kids out there,
Uh-huh.
it's coming back from a vacation, right? Like
Yep.
I had a week long vacation and now I have to get back to normal life. Like, oh, this sucks. But for you guys, it was like, well, it's a month long quote unquote vacation, obviously doing a shitload of work. I don't want to put down what you were doing, but
Yeah.
like, cool, we're out traveling for a month. And now it's like, oh, we're back into, I've got emails to catch up on. I've got
Mhm.
meetings with bosses that I don't want to talk to. Like it,
Yep.
it hits hard.
It does. Back in the office 3 days a week. The first week I was home, I was super sick, and I was actually very, very okay with that because it gave me an excuse to not go into the office
Yeah.
because I would realize later I was having a bout of a depressive episode. But I just I could not get my ass into the office that week. I was like, I cannot sit there at my desk. I can't be in a meeting room, a conference room. I can't do it. And it's still taking me a while. I'm definitely in a better place now, but it took so long for me to get back into the swing of things, and it was a tough re-entry
Yeah.
into the real world.
Yeah, for sure. Sawyer, what do you think as far as like coming back in? Again, you were, I assume, mostly pilot too, right? Like you were driving most nights and all that. So fucking up your sleep schedule even further than just playing shows and then trying to recalibrate.
Yeah, the sleep schedule is definitely that's probably the hardest thing.
We're still not
I kind of just
recalibrating.
like embraced it. Yeah, I like we stay up pretty late and uh I get up pretty late. But yeah, tour was just crazy. Like it was like the easiest thing to do and also like the hardest thing at the same time.
Yeah.
Like all you had to really do was show up and on time and play. But obviously like all the in between
Mm,
that was pretty hard and like still trying to like not ignore the real world
mm.
because it's easy to do that when you're just on the road every day. And I definitely slipped into um, that mindset too, which was hard to get out of. Yeah, it's kind of like that vacation mindset where you're like just ignoring, you know, what's happening. Um, but yeah, coming back, uh, yeah, I mean, it's been challenging for sure, just to live life, live life the normal way.
The peasant life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I will say though, I noticed when we got back from tour, Sawyer had this like renewed sense of motivation for the band. Like he was like, we went on tour for a month with one of our favorite bands. Like we fucking did that shit. Let's go. Like we've got this. And he was like writing and producing and learning guitar, and like it was like full speed ahead for Sawyer. And meanwhile, I
Yeah.
like can't even bring myself to take a shower. And I'm like, who is this man that came home from tour with me?
yeah, definitely very inspiring for sure.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah. I think that's the thing too, like being, especially like a band like 408 that in this scene is one of the top names right now, hands down, bar none. And I think, it's you're getting to pick their brains on the off days and in between sets or whatever. and then they put on an incredible show. So just seeing them perform and living off their energy a little bit, it's like, this is what I want to pursue. So I can understand that, Sawyer. Like,
Yeah.
that's what I want to fucking do all the time. And I want to do that for somebody else where we're the headliners and we're giving advice and, you know, bringing out new kids.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I haven't even thought that far ahead. That's so sweet.
So let's start, you know, kind of talking about the story, right? So obviously mental health has always been at the forefront of the band and your life, Courtney and Sawyer. I'm sure you as well, with a lot of her trauma, but also your own trauma throughout life as well. um Kind of for people that aren't familiar with your story, you've written the song One More Night about your sister, but talk a little bit about kind of that trauma point and like how you've kind of manipulated it in your mind to be
Hmm.
a source of power versus the source of sadness.
Sure. Let's get into it. There's a lot there. Um, well, so I grew up in a very conservative Christian household. I still have two loving parents that are still married. They've been together since they were 16. They were each other's prom dates, had their first kid at 20. The rest is history. But I had many, many siblings. I was one of four until my sophomore year of high school when we had three kids move in with us, and I gained three more siblings. So I became one of seven. And we definitely had everything that we needed. We were by no means like suffering, but I mean, all seven children and my dad, we shared one shower and one bathroom, and we let my mom have her own. So that was
Yeah.
definitely different. It was very
Brutal.
crowded. Well, yeah, we all shared rooms. I shared a room with both my sisters, my now, adopted sister and my biological sister. And it was a lot. But at the time you don't know that. So you're just rolling with the punches. It's not like my parents sat me down and were like, hey, everyone cool with this? It sort of happened. And so a lot of loudness growing up, a lot of church, a lot of not having alone time. And within, at least my segment of Christianity, mental health was at a weird point. So my parents, I would say, growing up, didn't quite buy into it, if that makes sense. So if
Mhm.
someone would say they're depressed, or if I told them, oh, so and so from my class, had to go to an inpatient because they couldn't get out of bed, they were sad. My parents would say things like, they need to get outside more. They should just buy them a treadmill, like get them a sunlight, like, stuff like
Yeah.
that. Didn't really believe in the whole medication thing. And it wasn't until I think we were all kind of forced into confronting it head on that we realized, like, oh shit, like there is actually something to this. And so when I was a senior in high school was when I started to notice that my older sister Jessica was having some issues. She struggled with alcohol abuse, and I did not know this until, again, it punched me right in the face when they came home from college, my sisters and their friend. And they picked me up to go to a concert in the city at my favorite venue, our favorite band. And my sister was underage, but she was plastered. And I was like, this is new. This is weird. Come to find out, it had been a problem for they were freshmen in college, my
Mhm.
sisters, and it had started to become an issue. But they went to college in Michigan. I lived in Chicago. I lived in the suburbs, so I was pretty distant from that. I was young. I kind of let my parents handle it, but over the years it definitely got worse and worse and worse, and she just struggled so much. And my parents and my family, we were pretty secretive about it. I think in the Christian culture too, there's a lot of shame and like
Mhm.
shame-based teaching, and people are weird about their reputations. And my family was very, very, I don't want to say prominent, but like very well known in the church.
Yeah.
Like familiar faces. My brother would end up being the youth pastor there. We were there all the time. And so, we were going through all this with my sister, and no one at church knew. And again, my dad is just thinking like, we just need to be more disciplined with her. Like, she just needs to be on house arrest or grounded, or we're taking away her license, or, maybe if we do this, maybe if she volunteers more, blah, blah, blah. Like we were still kind of in that track of like, how do we fix this?
Right.
And how do we do it alone so that no one else knows what's going on? And so um finally one day trying to figure I like truthfully I realized in therapy a couple years ago how much of this I sort of blocked out. Like the order of events is not clear in my
Yeah.
head. Like I don't know what comes first. But um my sister the day before Christmas Eve, I couldn't tell you what year it was. Honestly, it's all a blur. But she took a bunch of pills and tried to take her own life. And this was when she was home from college. I think I was in college at that point. I'm not actually sure. But I slept through the whole thing. But apparently, she texted her boyfriend at the time goodbye. He called my parents. They were asleep. So he called an ambulance to the house. The ambulance came. That's how my parents woke up, were the paramedics knocking on the door. I could sleep through anything. So I slept through it, all of it. And I woke up and it turned out that year that we were going to spend Christmas at a mental hospital where my sister would spend inpatient. And that was just totally new for us. And
Yeah.
that was the first time I think that my parents realized this is not just something that we can like Bible verse our way out of, and she's not just going to like grow out of this. Like this is a problem
Yeah.
that is bigger than us. And so that was a really, really tough year. And it sort of seemed like everything from then just sort of kept escalating, getting worse and worse. Um, and so when she got out of that, she continued to try and, she'd have bouts of sobriety, she'd have bouts of being okay and happy, and then bouts where it was really, really bad. And eventually we thought maybe she needs to get out of the house. So me and her and our other sister, we moved to the city together. We get an apartment together. Um, and boy, was it. That's when I started dating Sawyer, actually. It was like right when I moved in with my sisters, and she had just gotten out of like a rehab center again. So we were kind of in and out of those things. My parents were running out of money. We were running out of things to do. So we were just trying, like, let's get her out to the city, get her a new job. She could be with her siblings. Like, she doesn't have to worry about her parents judging eyes, whatever. But it kind of felt like my parents being like, okay, like, you deal with it for now because
Yeah.
we give up. But again, I just don't think that we understood how bad it was. And it's hard when you're in it. And I mean, I'm in college, I'm working two jobs and going to class, and I just started dating this boy, and I like have so many things going on. And so it's hard. And my sister definitely got worse and worse. And Sawyer was actually there the first time I ever witnessed her relapse. And so we were having a movie night, and she was 2 weeks out of her last rehab stint, and she was very visibly intoxicated, trying to carry popcorn back to the couch and runs into the wall, spills it everywhere. I'm like, she's drunk, I know it. And so I call my dad, blah, 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 the rest is history. But the difference there was he didn't send her back to rehab. He was like, okay, we're just gonna deal with it this time. And I was like, okay, that's fine. So a few weeks go by after that. I'm kind of upset with my family for not trying to help again. I am working at Starbucks. I work the 5 a.m. shift. So I get up at 3:45. I clock in at 4:15. I work till 10:30 or noon. I go get lunch at another Starbucks, and then I clock in for my shift at Lululemon from 2:30 to 8. And then from about 8 to midnight, I'm doing my homework, usually with Sawyer, and doing my online classes for college, and then, going to sleep and do it all again. So I'm like so busy, and so I don't really notice really what's going on with my sister. I'm frustrated that she's relapsed. I'm frustrated that my parents won't help her. And again, it takes something so like absurdly powerful to smack us in the face for us to stop and notice again that like something is happening. And so not too long after she relapsed, I was woken up by her at around 4 in the morning, 4 or 5 in the morning, which is not unusual for her. She takes a long time to get ready. So if she has to be somewhere at 9 a.m., her ass is up at 4:30 and she's curling her hair. So it wasn't unusual, but immediately, she wakes me up and she's mid-sentence by the time I'm like coherent. I can see in her eyes something's off, and my first thought is, oh, she's drunk. But she's just like babbling and talking incoherently, and I'm confused, and so I get up and I'm afraid, and I'm like, let's go out into the living room. What do you like, what is going on? And I walk into the living room, and the entire apartment has been rearranged. Somehow over the course of the nighttime, my sister by herself has moved every piece of furniture around. The couches are different. Everything's like things that she probably wouldn't have been able to lift her. Like, I was blown away.
Yeah.
Um, and she had everything set up to look like we were about to host a get together. And I was just kind of taking it all in. I also noticed all over the walls, she had made drawings and like written Bible verses, and had written a bunch of motivational quotes and like taped them up all over the house. And so this is like 4 a.m. She hasn't stopped talking. The whole apartment is rearranged. I'm like, this doesn't seem like drunk Jessica, because drunk Jessica can't move a couch by herself,
Right.
but this definitely isn't my sister. Like, what is going on? And she's just talking nonsense. Come to find out, she was setting up for a get together, and she had sent a text to everyone in her contact list with our address, telling them that we were going to host a church group and talk through the Bible with each other. And at that point, I knew that something was very wrong, and I had to call my dad. So luckily, he also is an early riser. I called him. I'm like, something's happening. I don't think she's drunk, but something's wrong with Jessica, and I am scared. I'm scared for my life. I'm scared for her life. I don't know what's going on. So my dad, it's an hour for him to get to the city. So I'm sitting there with her for an hour, freaking out. I'm shaking. I don't know what to do. She continues talking about total nonsense. I'm sitting in a living room that looks totally different than when I went to bed. I have no idea what's happening. My dad picks her up. I don't know where they go. I just kind of have to keep going about my life. So I wake up, I go to my shift, I go to class, I do the things. I'm talking with Sawyer. I'm trying to just be like, that happened, and it's over and it's fine. And she's somewhere and she's getting help, and I just had to trust that. And so turns out she was able to get a diagnosis, and what I had witnessed with her was a manic episode, and she was then diagnosed with bipolar type 2, which I knew what bipolar was, just because
Right.
everyone's like, they use it in casual conversation. You like call people that when they're moody, whatever. But this was just something totally different. I mean, it was just, I I can't even describe what it was like to be with her when she was in that. And what I had realized later is that I had seen her through so many depressive episodes, but I had never seen her at quite that level of manic. And
Hmm.
so that was just totally new for me. And so I think at that point we thought we had hit like a fork in the road. We're like, okay, now it has a name. We can battle this. Like, we know what this is. We have a socially acceptable reason for why she is the way that she is. And it was like, maybe this is going to start to make sense. And it didn't. And it just got more challenging. And she was in and out of therapy, in and out of treatment, in and out of rehab. Um, they were constantly trying to balance her meds. She was on them, she was off them. She couldn't be trusted. We never knew if she was telling the truth. It just got so, so hard. And again, like during, I was so detached that I probably, like, if you asked me how I was doing back then, I would have been like, I'm so great. Like, I have this awesome boyfriend. I'm making a ton of money. Like, I got my dream job somewhere. Like, I just was like, this is just life. Life is
Yeah.
just happening to me. I have nothing to like base it off of, whatever. Um, but I mean, we just tried and tried and tried everything with my sister, and nothing was working, and she kept lying and she kept relapsing, and my parents were out of money, out of patience. No one really can give you like a handbook on like how to love someone with bipolar.
Yeah.
And there's still not a lot of research about it, and not a lot is known about how to treat it. And my sister Jessica would tell me all the time, and this is so fucked up, but she would say, my condition has a 3 out of 4 suicide rate. And so I'm probably gonna end up killing myself one. Like she would tell me that all the time. And I was like,
Yeah.
great, thank you so much. That's very encouraging. And so just that would replay in the back of my head. And like it just sort of felt like that was the worst case scenario. And so anytime she would relapse, anytime she would disappear, like we all just thought she was dead. And sometimes like she would sleep on the couch if she was sleeping off, a bender, and I would be like, I'm gonna wake up and she's gonna be not breathing. Like I just constant fear of like she's going to die,
Yeah.
which was really hard. And so my parents got to a point where they cut her out and kicked her out. And that was when Sawyer and I had gotten engaged. And I remember the last time I saw her was when I was on my way out the door for a wedding dress fitting that she was supposed to attend. But when I got to the door, she had her suitcases, and my parents said, we are going to take a break, some time away from each other. She's going to go somewhere and we're going to figure it out. And so they thought it best to cut her out, stop enabling. They told us all to do the same, my siblings and I. So Sawyer and I had a really short engagement, and we got engaged in August, got married in November. I did not invite my sister to the wedding, per recommendation of my parents. So, I mean, we were trying that like movie thing of like cold
Yeah.
turkey. And then we were expecting the Cinderella story of like, it took 5 years and she hit rock bottom, but she's better than ever now. Like that's kind of what we were hoping. But that, my friends, was 2020 or 2019 into 2020. And so I get married, I move in with Sawyer, we get a cat, things are okay. We were in a band at that time that broke up and we lost a lot of our friends. And then the pandemic hits, and I still haven't seen my sister since the day she walked out the door. Um, and when the pandemic hits, no one knows what the hell is going on. Everyone's panicking. It's every person for themselves. So we just
Yeah.
batten down the hatches for, 3 months. Summertime rolls around. It's my birthday. My sister sends me a text. It's the first time I've heard from her since my wedding day when she texted me and she told me happy birthday. This was June 30th. It's actually coming up here in a bit. But I told her thanks, told her I missed her. She asked if I wanted to get coffee, and I told her, we're in a global pandemic. I don't know if I feel comfortable with that.
Yeah.
So let's revisit that later. And then 8 days later is when she would end up taking her own life. In the midst of the pandemic, hadn't seen her since October. She took her life in July, so it had been a long time. Last time I spoke with her was my birthday when she texted me. And like I said, at that point, it was pretty much no contact. We hadn't seen her. So much had happened. I got married, I got a cat, I got a place, and um, it was almost like what we had all been afraid of the whole time happened. And it was like the worst thing we could have possibly imagined. And it was like, where do we go from here?
Yeah.
Like, what now? And the wildest thing is that 2 days before she took her own life, my grandma died. So my dad's mom died, and then 2 days later, my sister took her life. And so we buried them 2 weeks apart, and their funerals were 2 weeks apart. And this was
Yeah.
all during the pandemic. And then as soon as that was over, it was her birthday. Her birthday is July 22nd. It's like July just sucks. July is
Yeah.
like full of anniversaries and all this stuff. It was like the worst month of my life. And to this day, it's been 4 years, which feels like no time and also so much time. And July is still so, so hard. And so I mentioned like we were in a band, but at that time I played drums. And that was what I did. I would have laughed my ass off if you told me I would ever sing anything ever in front of anyone. Didn't think I'd ever have my own band, blah, blah, blah. Pandemic hits. I don't think anyone's ever going to have a band again. The world is over. Everything's ending. My sister dies. I'm like, now this is my life. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know what to do with that. She was a lovely singer. We all thought she'd be on American Idol. She would win. She'd be in a band. She'd be famous. She was stunning, and like her YouTube covers were always a hit. Like that was her thing. That was supposed to be her. But I like to think, I don't even know if I like to think it, but I had a realization that maybe she left some of that with me here. I don't know how that's possible or if that's possible, but like I said, I would have never ever thought. And so I had never written a song. I had never even, I had wanted to, because I mean, who doesn't want to write a song? I love music. But I played drums. I played drums at church. Sawyer played drums at church. He was learning bass. That's what we did. But about a year along the grieving process and the whole pandemic overload and all the stuff that comes with that, I was doing dishes in the kitchen, and for the first time in my life, a melody popped into my head attached to words, and I was like, what is this? And so I pulled out my phone and my hands were shaking and I was so embarrassed, but I like recorded a voice memo and sent it to my friend, and he put some guitar behind it and we kept going with it, and all of a sudden we had a song, and I was like, this is insane. This has never happened to me before, but all of a sudden here it is. And then from there it just never stopped. I
Yeah.
think something about my sister dying and the worst thing I could possibly think of happening, having happened, made me less afraid of more trivial things.
Hmm.
So, it's like I have nothing to lose. And
Yeah.
there's two sides of that, the self-destructive side, which definitely started to happen as well, and then the side that's like, so I'm going to take more risks. And one of those was starting to write music, being in a band, doing all these things. And so I kept writing. We formed the group, we gave it a name, started playing shows, and ups and downs and all the in-betweens. And um, basically from 2022 and on, the band has been a thing that has
Hmm.
existed and has taken the forefront in my life. And I like to think that since Jessica is not here, that I can bring her name and her voice and her story to rooms full of people, because I know, it should have been her, but she's not here. So it's gonna have to be me. And I am no Celine Dion, but I'm doing my best. Jessica was the better singer. But I learned through that whole process the harm in keeping secrets or being hush hush about those kinds of things. I
Hmm.
learned harm in shame-based faith and shame-based parenting and shame, like just all
Yeah.
around. And so I made a commitment to myself that I was going to be the most open, honest, and vulnerable person in the room always, so that someone who maybe wasn't as comfortable could either get the strength and feel comfortable, or could come to me and know that, like, I'm going to tell you how much of a fuck up I am and how many mental illnesses I have. And so
Yeah.
you know who to come to when the time comes. And I think that also just bled into the writing and the songwriting. So I had this melody idea pop into my head with some words attached to it, and it was the I'm just here to kill the vibe. It was the
Hmm.
pre-chorus, and we had a writing session just like we normally do, and I sang it a cappella. And then, the boys did their thing. They wrote parts to it. We made this song. That was in the summer of 2023. We did play it live in July at Summerfest, and we played Summerfest 2 days before the anniversary of my sister taking her own life. And so that was a huge moment. I remember sitting on stage and
Yeah.
crying, and pretty wild, but that was definitely like the largest venue I had spoken about that story in. We sang that song for the first time. Um, but we didn't know what was going to
Right.
happen with it. But that song was just an overflow of how I had been coping over the past 3 years after the pandemic, after losing my sister, after unpacking all the baggage of growing up and living with her and her addiction and all of that. And so, my sister took her own life. So obviously she got there, for lack of a better term, first, but it's not like I hadn't had those thoughts before. So that song was me
Right.
wrestling through that. Like, I don't I don't want to die, but I also don't want to live. Like I've seen what it
Mhm.
does when you take your own life. I'm not going to do that. But I can't keep living how I'm living. And I just thought the song was like so hyper like specific about me that I was like, people are just gonna think I'm cuckoo crazy, depressed girl, and it's okay because my sister died and it'll be fine.
Yeah.
Um, and so what we would just post it on TikTok, we would sing it live. And that was, like I said, that was over the summer. It wasn't until the weekend of Thanksgiving that we had a TikTok blow up of that song. It was absurd. It was overnight. I mean, millions and millions. There were hundreds of people listening to us on Spotify at once. It was like everything changed in a second. And I could not have been more shocked. I don't know
Yeah.
about you. I did not think that was going to happen with that song.
Yeah.
I feel like I've been talking forever. I'm sorry. Do you have
No, you're
anything to
All right, no.
Okay.
yeah, you're fine. There are several things in that I want to unpack, and obviously, I want to thank you for telling the story. I am going to shift to Sawyer briefly before we get into unpacking some of that, because I think well, like I think, hearing you tell the story and knowing that he's on the sidelines a little bit, for you,
hmm
Sawyer, being that outside perspective, not growing up with her and kind of coming into the family and seeing it, how did that kind of affect you guys from a relationship standpoint, or even just what you felt like was potentially happening there?
Mm.
Yeah, yeah, it's really tough. Because I feel like I'm like just starting to unpack it now. Honestly, like the past couple of years have been, looking back and figuring out, what that meant for me and how it affected me. Um, but yeah, it kind of like Courtney was just saying, it's hard to like see when that stuff is happening, like in the moment. It's like so tough. And because you can tell yourself so many lies, like, oh, this is normal. Like, everyone's still alive, like it's fine,
Yeah.
and kind of just like push it to the side. And then obviously when something irreversible happens, that's when you're like, oh shit. um yeah, like you just got to figure it out. So yeah, I've been spending the past couple of years just like um just looking at myself and like how I was raised, and similar to Courtney too, very similar. My parents didn't really believe in mental health stuff, and
They're still so confused.
yeah, but I love
Bless
them. I
them.
love
They
them.
ask a lot of questions
They're
though, which people are
Hey,
afraid.
but that's how the change happens, is by
yeah,
having those
Yes.
conversations. So
they're great parents.
Yeah.
But it's been such a like so I've loved this past couple of years, just like really working on my like how my brain's wired, and it's been so life-giving um to like speak to Courtney about like this stuff I see now that I didn't see back then. Has been so good. Obviously that's all therapy that I'm getting that help from. And
Mm.
it's just such a blessing to have that support, that therapy support.
And I feel like you just when did you start going? Has it been like a year, even a full year yet?
No, it's been like I think 3 years.
What?
Yeah.
That you found Noel?
Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah, so I obviously started going to therapy actually before my sister died. Oddly enough, started going in December of 2019. Um, but it took a bit longer to convince Sawyer to go,
Mhm.
and he was dreading it.
I hate talking.
He hates
I
talking.
don't like talking, and I do have feelings, but I don't really like talking about my feelings.
He's very much a keep the peace,
yeah.
keep the peace kind of guy. But it is just his therapist is incredible. I mean, like him and his therapist, he'll come home from a therapy session and then like tell me, oh, we were talking about you in this situation and this is what we learned about you. Like they're literally therapizing me in the
Yeah.
sessions, and I'm having these realizations. But yeah, like I've noticed the same thing is that it kind of took it took a bit. Life kind of paused for a second,
Yeah.
and we're still working on unpacking all that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it definitely takes time. I lost my brother in 2018, and
Mm.
it was one of those, you know, probably 2 or 3 years minimum before I was like, okay, it's time to sit down and like really
Yes.
assess everything. Because you like he had, you know, a daughter, and so it's like, okay, now I have to pick up the pieces and be the uncle that's taking over and all that.
Mm.
And you know, it's one of those things where, like I was telling you guys kind of before we are in the episode, that like one of the things I wanted to touch on is that survivor's guilt to some extent when it comes to a
Oh.
suicide,
Mhm.
and questioning every fucking thing that you can possibly question about, like, why them, why not me, what could I have done different, you know, and all of that. And you know, one of the things through your story, Courtney, that I want to touch on to start with is that religious side.
Mm.
Religious trauma is very real.
Um,
It affects so many people. But for you and kind of your situation, you know, looking back, obviously, because it's easier to see it now, how
oh yeah.
much do you think that sheltering, if you will, of, oh, we just need to pray for more, we need to do, you know, let's find the Bible verses that influence this, how much did that realistically probably harm the situation rather
Oh,
than help the situation?
yes. It's so conflicting because what I've learned too is I feel like where there's one extreme, there's the other.
Hmm.
And so on the one hand, so much of what we learned in church was so damaging. And I touched on shame and how that was like an integral part of how they kind of told you to operate. And
Yeah.
within my house specifically too, we were sort of taught like if you're happy and content and comfortable, like that's a sign that you're not following God. Like you should be tortured and taking the weight of the world on your shoulders. And um, that always affected my sister tenfold, how it affected us.
Yeah.
And like we, we all people would ask like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And we'd be like, oh, we're gonna start a microfinancing business to end world hunger and poverty. And like this is at like age 12 and like 14.
Right.
We're like trying to save the world. And we all felt that for sure, even my adopted siblings. But my sister felt that a lot more. So there was just so much shame attached with what she was going through. And I think, the idea of like helping yourself was non-existent. And so
Mhm.
it was like always seeking outside of yourself to, seeking in God, seeking in volunteering, seeking in other people. Like, how can we find this healing in the church? And like you said, and through prayer and scripture, and like, how can we learn our way out of this? And I think the most damaging part about that was the shame and also the lack of learning about yourself. Like it was
Mhm.
never encouraged to go to therapy. It was never encouraged to take some time for yourself, to take a break, to look inward, meditate, which is funny because that's, a form of prayer is
Yeah.
meditation, go figure. But that was, I think those two pieces were super damaging because, in her mind, like she was serving God, and the fact that she wasn't happy and the fact that she was different, like, God says there will be trials, God says this, and we're supposed to be in pain and things are supposed to be hard. If they're good, we're doing something wrong. And so I think that is what allowed us to just keep going and to
Mhm.
not try to like actually stop and figure out what's happening. And you can write it off by there was a lot of talk of like demons in our house and how the demons are out to get us and the enemy and Satan. And it wasn't no, I think maybe she's sick. It was
Right.
like we are being attacked by evil because we are Christians, and that definitely didn't help. So it wasn't like we need a doctor. It was like, yeah, let's keep diving headfirst into this whole God thing and hopefully he will heal us. um but on the flip side of that, it was my parents' small group that were the first people at our house. It was our pastor.
Right.
That was our first phone call. I don't know if it's called, what's it called? He didn't officiate. He did the funeral. I don't know
Yeah.
what it's
I don't know what it's called either. Officiate
called.
works for me.
Yeah. And then, we did it at our church and I don't think, my parents could not have gotten through that without the church family. And so like it's
Hmm.
weird because it's like the two stark contrasts. Like it's such a cause of hurt, but they were such a force of healing at the same time that I wrestle with that all the time. And I was just having a conversation actually about like, am I going to put my kids in youth group? And what do I want my kids to, no announcements, we're not expecting or anything, but just hypothetically in the future. And it's just so hard because on the one hand, it had so much to do with the shame that my sister felt. And on the other hand, I think it kept her around maybe longer than we would have had her if not for that, because when we exited her life, I mean, the only people she had were her small group. And I know she
Yeah.
kept in touch with them until the bitter end. So yeah, it's interesting. I don't really know how to sum it up. And it's just like it's confusing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true for a lot of people. I was forced to go to a a New Salem Friends Quaker church until I was 13 years old.
Oh
So
boy.
yeah, as you can imagine, there was a not a lot of mental health talk there or anything either, and it was very much the old world, like you just got to pray. If you're having a bad day, it's because of this. It's, whatever. And it's like, nope, turns out, according to this piece of paper over here, I'm
Yeah.
actually kind of fucked up in the head. So let's figure that out.
Yep.
But I think there is that weird dichotomy of like you said, it, on the one hand, it really challenges and hurts the situation because it's not really providing a solution. But on
Yep.
the other hand, it's like, okay, but for those, and this is kind of what I've always said, for those that church works for, it works amazingly for, but
Hmm.
it is not for everybody. I don't feel, because, and it's not cookie cutter either. That's the big thing,
Right.
is there's so many different types of churches and whatever. Um, but I think it is interesting how, you said, like, while they may not have been the best solution for what was happening, once the result came, they were the best solution for the next problem.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good way to put it. It was like, yeah, they were not providing a solution and they were actively dissuading us from finding a solution is
Right.
how it felt.
Yeah.
For sure. But then yeah, in that next phase, they ended up being the solution, which is just wild.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking back, what are some, obviously, we're not mental health
Definitely
providers or anything, but what are
not.
some things that you, looking back, are kind of looking at now and going, that was a trigger. I probably should have noticed this, or, what are
Hmm.
the, as much as it sucks, what are the I blame myself things that you would advise people to pay attention to in their friends and family um,
Yeah,
struggling with those things?
that is a great question. One of the things that I have thought about endlessly is this concept of enablement. And so often mental illness also comes with addiction, as was the case with my sister. And so it's hard to blur. I don't even know if it's blurring the lines, but to me, it was like, I want to love her and support her without enabling her.
Hmm.
And I think I put so much emphasis on my perceived power to enable her addictive behavior that looking back, I think it was so misguided. The
Yeah.
For me, unless I'm like taking shots with her at a bar, like
Right.
I'm not, I just now I think it's so ridiculous that I could have ever thought that. And I know it's not because it felt totally real in the situation. It's incredibly valid. I'm sure that there is evidence of enablement being a thing, but when it comes to, and I don't even know if I should say this, but like I'd rather have a drunk sister than a dead sister. So like if we're
Yeah.
really wanting to get down to it, like that's where I'm at. And so if I could have gotten a beer with her and she'd still be here, fuck yeah, I'd do it. And I would do it and I would piss off my dad. And I know that now. I couldn't have
Right.
known that back then and he would have ripped my head off, but I would do it. And so I just think I was so caught up in just like what is best for her and I don't know how to deal with this, so I don't want to do anything wrong. I don't want to say anything wrong. I mean, me and her really didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
at all. And I know that she had so much shame about it, because she did make mistakes when she was drunk. She embarrassed me. She was mean to me. She'd say things and not remember and blah blah blah. And so I think, I definitely would have been more open, I think, with her. I wish I wouldn't have shied away from talking about it. I wish that I didn't just leave it up to my parents. But I was young.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna be her mom. Like,
Right.
but I feel like especially in a Christian house, like, your dad has all full authority over the household. He knows all, he's closest to God, whatever. Like, that's definitely how it was in my house. Like,
Yeah.
my dad had the end, like, all the say in everything. But I definitely would not have it that way. I wouldn't just take everything my parents said as fact. I wouldn't just take everything in the Bible as written. I would dissect things. I would talk about things. And I would just remove myself a bit more from my sister's addiction and her
Yeah.
illness. Like, as much as I wish I could have affected it in a big way, I just couldn't have. And
Yeah.
for some reason, it took me forever to realize that. And it's hard to realize that in the moment. So, like, I don't know. I'm sure the enablement conversation is challenging, and obviously addiction is different for everyone, but I just think that's so ridiculous now that I would have thought that. I just would not have been so caught up in it. And I definitely would have invited her to our wedding. I hated not having her there. But my dad, had convinced me that she would show up drunk and ruin it and whatever. And I kind of wish I would have taken that chance, or at
Yeah.
least like set up some guardrails. Like, if she does show up drunk, Aunt Susan or whatever is going to take her to my house. She's going to sleep it off, and the no one's going to tell me until the day after, or like whatever. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I just,
Yeah.
I wouldn't treat things so cut and dry. Um, it's not like this or that. It's not like she's either drunk or she's sober. Like,
Right.
she's going to be battling this thing forever, and we don't know a whole lot about it, and we have no power over it. She has no power over it. So I would have just accepted that I knew less than I did. I wouldn't have taken my parents' word for everything, and I would have been a hell of a lot more open and lenient and forgiving and loving, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, like, it really had nothing to do with me. But we're good at centering ourselves. So
Right.
like, it's just so silly now to think about. But I think those are my top
Yeah.
things.
Well, and I think, there's definitely some truth to the enablement side of things. There's a difference between, and I think this is what's really hard for people to recognize. There's a difference between actively enabling, i.e., taking shots with her, handing her drinks, whatever, and passively enabling her by,
Mhm.
I'm not going to talk about it. We're going to pretend it's not a problem. And
Yep.
then, she doesn't want to talk about it because she doesn't feel that it's a problem either.
Yeah.
That was very much, my brother was the same. He battled alcoholism his whole life. I'm pretty confident he got into some other stuff at one point too. And it is what it is. But, same thing that you said, like, if so I don't drink at all. I'm 39 years sober, I'm 39 years old. I've never drank. But if me going to the bar and taking a drink with my brother would have him here, I would have.
Mhm.
Um, and I think it's interesting too, because like it's easy to look back and say those things, but you and I both know in that exact moment, we probably would have not done it because that's
No.
not who we were in that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the really, really uncomfortable part of victim blaming, or, like blaming ourselves, absorbing that guilt of what happened.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I think, especially when it's a sibling, right? It hits us much harder because we're supposed to be there for each other and all of that stuff. How do you feel like, you know, maybe even pre her taking her life? Because I think I had some of that with my brother, that even before it happened, there was a little bit of guilt when
Mhm.
oh, he relapsed or, whatever. And it's like, could I have done something different? How
Yep.
did you kind of identify some of that in yourself? And obviously you're still working through some of that now, but kind of what's that look like on your side?
Yeah. My sister Elizabeth and I talk about this all the time. Of course, especially around like July and the anniversaries
Hmm.
and things like that. It's something that will never be answered fully, and changes a lot with each passing year. But I think what I had to come to terms with is I could sit there and cry about how I didn't get coffee with her. And maybe if I had, that was 8 days before she chose to die. And it's super easy to think that if I had just said yes to getting coffee and we picked a date, that she would have not done it then because
Right.
she would have wanted to wait until the date. But then, I think about it and I just don't know. You just don't know. And do
Right.
I think that I could have made different choices that would have caused a different outcome? I do. I do believe that I could have, and that's where my sister Elizabeth has landed as well. Is like, yeah, actually there's a lot that we could have done and said that could have changed things, and that doesn't change things now.
Right.
And similarly in the moment with her addictions, I think where I blamed myself the most was not coming to her defense more with my parents and not giving her the benefit of the doubt more. And again, like living in that gray of like, okay, she may be drinking again, but like at least she's not self-destructing. At least she didn't drop out of school again. At least she's still going to work. Like, I don't know if there could
Yeah.
have been some like middle ground. So I just always would blame myself for, again, just taking what my parents said as Bible, for lack of a better term, and like letting them handle it. Like, I just wish I would have thought for myself and taken a moment to think for myself. I think we just kept trying to move forward, just move forward, just move forward, just keep going, keep doing the thing, keep going to school, get the grades, make your money, blah, blah, blah. And yeah, I kind of forget what the question was, but there's definitely a lot of things that I could sit there and blame myself for, and I do. And that was a lot of, I would say, the first 6 months, I think,
Hmm.
after was just all of the what ifs. I would pull up the text thread of her saying happy birthday to me and just read it until I cried so much that I couldn't anymore, and my
Yeah.
eyes were huge and I couldn't breathe. And um you do that for so long and you're like, this, what is the point? Who is
Right.
this helping? And I think also for a survivor of a sibling suicide, it's, oh my gosh, I'm totally losing my thought track. It was gonna be so good too. Damn it. Oh, okay. So I feel like you could convince yourself that you deserve to keep yourself in that cycle. At least that's how I felt. I was like, what kind of person? What kind of person does that to their sister? Like, what kind of person? I mean, I said things, I did things, I didn't say things
Hmm.
that I just now am appalled. Like, and again, in the moment, you don't know what you don't know. But now that I do, I'm like, God, that was so fucked. And so when I would sit there and read through the text and be like, why am I putting myself through this? I'd be like, you know why you're putting yourself through this, because you deserve it, because it's
Hmm.
your fault. Like, you're the reason she's gone. Now you can't take your life. You have to be here, and this is your punishment, is you have to live with
Yeah.
this. And, like, you deserve it. You suck as a human. And that was kind of the rationale, was like, you should be sad. And
Yeah.
I think to an extent it's true. Like, you need to let yourself be sad about it and grieve, and there's no reason to feel bad for it. But again, it's like, what does that really do? And
Yeah.
I think it can be true that I could have done things and changed the outcome, but I didn't, and the outcome is the outcome, and the world keeps spinning.
Well, and it's kind of like the movie The Butterfly Effect too, though, right? Like, if you would have done something different, what would have changed? Would it have made it been longer? Would it have made it been shorter? Like,
Mhm.
who knows? And it's hard to, especially with us sitting in the positions we're in. Sometimes it's really hard to look at that and accept that and go,
Yeah.
yes, but even if I would have told her what day we wanted to do coffee, it, you know, I've found myself to be much more like spiritual than religious. But one thing I do hold on from the religion side is that, like, when it's your day in the book, it's your day in the book, right? Like,
Mm.
everybody has a date even if you would have went and got coffee with her, maybe she would have gotten a car accident, or you know what I mean?
Right.
Like there's so many other things that could happen. So, I think it's a really morbid thing to take solace in. But that's how I've made peace with a lot of it, is like, you know, same thing for my brother. Like, even if I would have done something different, if that was his day, like he was a CDL, like garbage truck driver, he would do roll off dumpsters and stuff. And I'm like, what if he would have gotten a car accident instead? You know
Mhm.
what I mean? Like, so it's really a weird place to find yourself in, because you want to believe you could have changed the outcome,
Right.
but at the same time there's no guarantee that anything would have changed, or at least not for the better necessarily. So
Right.
um I had another question and I totally lost it
Mhm.
in that whole string. um so for you, like, this is another one that kind of gets uncomfortable for people, but obviously neither of us condone suicide as an option or anything like that. But how do you kind of view it? I look at it with my brother. He had his demons as long as I can remember. So I've often said that I don't believe he took his own life. I think his mind murdered his body, because it just didn't want to be there anymore. And so, like, obviously, like I said, we don't condone it, but I get really frustrated with people when they're like, "Oh, it's such a selfish thing to do." And I
Mhm.
just don't believe that. I think in that moment, they're trying to take themselves out of everybody's life because they feel like they're the problem. So it's like they're trying to solve a problem. What's kind of your view around, again, not condoning it, because obviously we don't want that to happen to anyone, especially our siblings, but kind of where do you stand on the view of that action?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question, and I'm glad you asked it because that's something I talk about all the time, is that I'll say like, well, I can't kill myself, like I have to be here and I know but the truth is I could.
Yeah.
Anyone can. Like what I didn't realize before my sister chose to die is that you can choose to die. It's the same with like you can choose to be unhealthy and drink a lot and make yourself sick and whatever. And I think about, my adopted siblings, their mother died of stage 4 ovarian cancer, and she fought, so hard, but it gets to a point where they get to say, I'm done fighting. And like you said about your brother's mind murdering his body, like I know that she was so tired and she had
Mhm.
been fighting for so long, and it took her 1 second, to step in front of that train,
Yeah.
and then it's over. And that makes sense to me. I resonate with that line of thinking. I
Yeah.
have had similar thoughts, and like I'm not going to do it, but the truth is that I could do it. It is a
Yeah.
choice to be here. And I take that with me everywhere. I mean, when I go and pick up my mobile order from Starbucks and I look at the person behind the counter, I'm like, I wonder what kind of fucking hell they have gone through to be standing behind that counter and handing
Yeah.
me my coffee. And we are both just choosing to be here. We're alive. We're doing the damn thing. Like, look at us doing our jobs. We're at work. It like sets this baseline of appreciation for humans that choose to stick around.
Mhm.
And then I think it gives more of an empathy to the ones who couldn't.
Right.
Because, you and I both know I don't I don't know if there was an alternate ending. Obviously there's not.
Right.
But I don't even know if there could have been, even if it would matter, because she was so, so sick. And she was so sick. And it's like, you can say that a cancer patient choosing to not pursue treatment, like my sibling's mom, is a selfish act, or you can look at it as a noble one, as, the last thing they do is to not be connected to tubes. They want to be at home, they want to be this. I mean, you're doing what you got to do, and that's all we're all doing, just what
Yeah.
we got to do. And so I think it just sort of opened my eyes to this, like, holy shit, like life is just a choice. We're all just here. We're choosing to be here, and that's pretty brave. Like the world
Yeah.
is fucked. Like we all know where we're all headed. Like you just
Yeah.
said, everyone's got a date. Like we know what happens. We've seen the movies, we've experienced it, whatever. Like it just kind of, I mean, it changed everything. It just shifted everything. And I think, yeah, I guess my view on it is like we all have that choice. And I'm so proud and overwhelmed when I get to be on stage in a room full of people who have chosen to be in that room, who have
Yeah.
chosen to stay alive, who have chosen to keep going, who have chosen to stay out late on a Wednesday night when they have a shit ass job they hate in the morning that they got to get up for and they haven't washed their hair in weeks. Like I just know that it's just people are so strong and they fight and it's just makes you appreciative of the people who are in front of you and I think makes you appreciate it's like there's there's a lot of song lyrics I want to quote, not my own, but other people's. But essentially it's like, do I want Jessica, my sister, to be just this sore spot of trauma and hurt and anger and disgust, or can I look at her life with happiness and
Mhm.
appreciation and learning and teaching and like it took a long time and it's still going to take a long time, but to hold both things, like
Yeah.
yes, she chose to die. We all have that choice. I'm not making that choice. She did, and now I have to make choices because of that choice. And that happens, with everything in life. And so I also am using the word choice too, and while simultaneously saying that I don't think she had a choice. So again, it's like it's nuanced, it's complicated. I don't understand it still. But it's just being able to hold all of these things at once and know that we are all just humans trying to human, and nothing will show you that like losing another human, just how fragile and similar we all are.
Yeah. Well, I think, in a in my particular case, kind of the thing that really frustrated me too around it was um extended family members, but still family members that would pull the whole like, "Well, I didn't think they'd ever do that. They didn't seem like that type of person or whatever." And it's like,
Oh,
first off, you're an
yes.
extended family member. Like you've not been around
As
in the first
in,
fucking place.
yeah.
Uh,
Uh,
but even others, you're sitting there and you're like, well, then how well did you actually know them? You know what I mean? Like, again, my brother fought those demons as long as I can remember. And I'm much like you in the sense of like, my depression has fucked up my memory. I've blocked out so much of my childhood and shit that, I just don't remember. But I do remember from a very young age him having, these battles. And, again, going back to the like, it's just such a selfish act. And it's like, but it's not, man. He's been fighting it for, 20 years, 30 years, whatever it's been. Eventually you're going to lose. And this was
yep,
just a big loss.
yep, exactly.
Yeah. And then on the song lyrics, the one that came to mind for me is that I use for my brother is from the Wonder Years. I just want to sell out my funeral. And it's know that I fought until the lights went out because
Oh,
I know he went down swinging.
yep, absolutely. Oh, that's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah. Um, So Sawyer, we're going to shift over to you again for a second here, bud. Uh, again, kind of your perspective around that as well, because like obviously you've dealt with it outside of this family and being this close to it. What was it like, new in a marriage and
Mm.
kind of new to the family and everything, and then immediately dealing with, oh shit, like their world's falling apart. What do I do?
Yeah. Um, it was just a lot of patience and understanding and um yeah, it like I think yeah, just a lot of patience. There's an analogy that my therapist uh told me about that I really liked, which was like your spouse, or like in this scenario, like Courtney is like swimming and drowning like in emotions, and like I want to jump in and save her. And obviously that would risk both of our lives and our emotional sanity. And he was like, you have to, let her like swim and figure it out. Like she's gonna survive. Like you can't, risk yourself getting emotionally unstable as well. Like you have to stay on the shore, on the dock, and like throw a lifeline. Um, and I think that's kind of like how is a good picture of like kind of what it's been like yeah, you just have to be very patient and understanding of like where other people are at and what other people are going through, and you have to be there to support them but not risk your own self in helping other people. um, and it sounds selfish, but yeah, I think that's been a huge help for me
Yeah.
recently.
Yeah. Well, and I think, you know, the three of us I know we're all very empathetic people. So we tend to absorb what the people around us are going through and things like that. So it is kind of a good reminder, that you can absorb some of it, but like you can't drown yourself to save someone else.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a song lyric right there.
Yeah. Feel free, put it in, just give me credit. um so kind of as we transition towards the end here, mainly because I have another podcast after this, but uh I think one of the things that I want to talk about is, again, as we move, both of us move past all this trauma. I think it's weird to even say move past, because they say time heals all wounds, but we both know that's a fucking lie.
Yeah.
It time goes on and it just gets more weird. It doesn't necessarily heal.
Yeah.
Like, just things are weird. But for
Yes.
you, what are you noticing are some of the tools in the toolbox, if you will, that when those waves come on, that you can kind of ground yourself and center yourself with?
Um, to the best of my ability, removing shame from the equation and remembering that that does nobody good. Also, regrounding in my choice to still be here on this planet as a human, humaning with my human and other humans. And so that's kind of like where I start, is like, okay, I'm choosing to be here. I am feeling these things, but I need to push through them because I've chosen to be here. So what do I need to do then to start? Like, like you just gotta take it to the most simple level, which is like, okay, I am feeling sad and overwhelmed. What am I going to do about it? Am I going to choose to die? No. Okay, then what? Then what's
Right.
next? What's next? One step at a time. And I think too, there used to be a lot of guilt around enjoying myself or being happy or being grateful or anything like that. And I think recently this is what I've been wrestling with, but I and again, I can't say this with certainty because I can't see the alternate endings if there were any,
Right.
but I say this a lot to Sawyer and to friends. Like if Jessica hadn't died, I don't think I would have ever started singing. I don't think I would have ever written a song. I
Yeah.
wouldn't have done so many of these things. And would I give it all up to have her back in a second? Absolutely, to have not gone through that. But knowing, like, I had no clue that on the other side of the worst thing I could possibly imagine happening was the best thing happening that I could never have imagined, even if I tried. Like, I just would have never thought. And so I just think, again, like with life, you just have to hold both. And I'm like
Yeah.
learning how to hold both. It's fucked up. I wish she was here. I wish she could have stayed here. I wish she wasn't sick. I wish I did things differently. But I am here. She is not. I have to live with that. I am choosing to live with that. And I am quite proud of some of the choices I've made within choosing to
Yeah.
live with that. And I think the same things that make us weak can also be our superpowers. And I'm working on a song about that. Like for example, I struggle with social anxiety and it
Mhm.
sucks. and it makes going into the office difficult and being on stage difficult. And what it also does is it makes me super in tune with the rest of the room. I can pick out a person having a bad day, not wanting to be there, and I can adjust accordingly. I can pull them aside if I need, whatever. Like it makes me hyper aware in a way that I can sense people better than other people. And that's awesome. That's a superpower. And so similarly with
Yeah.
my sister, like I get to choose then how that affects me going forward. And I get to make it my own now. You know, she did what she did and I couldn't control that, but I'm going to control what I can control, and I'm sure as hell going to use that to propel me in a direction I want to go in and not
Right.
a different direction. So that's where I'm at.
Well, and I think too, like you said, it's weird because we would sacrifice so much to have them back. But in a weird way, you almost have to celebrate the things that you've done since they've passed. So like,
Mhm.
obviously I wish my brother was still here. He decided to make that choice before his daughter graduated high school, and before she got accepted to college and all of that, and it was actually during her junior year. So she does track and field, and in her senior year she ran her personal bests, and he wasn't there
Oh
for
my
that.
God.
And yeah, so that was really tough. But then at the end of it, you kind of have to look at it and go, yeah, he wasn't here for it, but that doesn't take away from her accomplishments and her accolades.
Amen.
We kind of have to reabsorb that a little bit, and still celebrate ourselves, because you know losing them obviously hurts more than anything else, but um it doesn't negate what we're able to do after them. It's just a different stage, or if we're going to be Taylor Swift, it's a different era of our life
Huh?
in that
Absolutely.
chapter. Um, so Sawyer, for you, kind of, what are some of the tools that you're using? Obviously, therapy as well, and I highly recommend it for anyone as well. Um,
Mhm.
but just like when you feel that overwhelming come on, or the deep lows, whatever, like where are you going to just go, cool, I need to get back to center, what is level?
Yeah, I mean, I find myself, the things that usually get me overwhelmed is like looking to the past and thinking like I could have done this differently, and like, oh, that didn't go well, I should have done this. Yeah, I find myself getting overwhelmed with that. And I mean, so I just try to center myself, trying to be present, like in the moment. Um, and that brings me back to reality. And something that's also really helped me and Courtney is we have this thing where we say like whatever's hot and cold,
Mm-hmm.
like if we're making a future decision or something like that. Um, it's um, you just have to like be very connected to yourself and making decisions for the future. Like uh, it can either feel hot or cold, and usually, obviously, you want like the warm feeling, and that doesn't always mean like the easy. It's never the easy way out. Like you could have a tough conversation that feels warm, but so like I'm always trying to strive for like the warm feeling, um, and that's not always the most comfortable um, thing that I want to do. And yeah, that's been very helpful for me.
For me too, because I'm like a know-it-all and I think I'm really smart, and I say that all the time, especially when I'm like having an anxiety attack or fighting. I'm like, I'm really smart. I know a lot of things and I am smart, but I think the warm and cold thing for us is our way of like admitting that we don't know everything,
Mm-hmm.
admitting that pretending to know everything is extremely overwhelming, admitting that there are future decisions that we should think about analytically, but I like the way that it removes that and just brings it to a spiritual almost level. Like it's at your very core. Does this make you feel warm or does it make you feel cold? Like the very simplest version of what you're feeling, like when you think about that next step, like and you're searching for that warmth, like it takes, it's not like, well, the logical thing to do would be to just take a fucking shower and wash my hair.
Right.
It's like, duh, like we know these things. But like that, that wouldn't have made me feel warm. There were other things I had to do before I got to that point. And I just love that it takes that like rationale out of it, and it's just like to the basic core of like yourself and what you need.
Yeah. Well, I think that ties in really well to like the trust your gut thing. You know, it's such a cliche, but you really have to listen to your stomach and your like if something makes you feel uneasy, there's a fucking reason. Like it's triggering your fight and flight symptoms. And if you're like thinking about the future and again, no announcements, but thinking about kids, like
Yeah,
okay, well, do I feel good about that or does that scare the shit out of me? Like
right.
that tells me where I'm at in this decision tree. Maybe it scares the shit out of you right now and it's like, okay, we need to readdress that later because it's not
Yeah.
now, you know. And that goes for everything, not just kids, for anybody that's still listening to us. But I think the thing there too is very much and you both can touch on this too, finding someone, whether it's a significant other or not, but someone that you can trust that I am safe with this person. I can open up and really be the authentic me in
Mm.
my darkest moment.
Yeah, I love that. I think too, like we're so lucky, and we say this all the time, that like we're married and marriage is the best thing ever, and we love it, and we've had such a great time, and it just gets better and better. It'll be 5 years in November. But what I'm learning too as an adult is like every like you don't need to find, or I haven't been able to find, nor do I need to find one person to be all of that for me.
Right.
I have so many people in my life that have such different functions. If I am the center of the universe, which I am the center
Right.
of the universe, there's I would go to my mom for questions about pregnancy. I would go to my sister-in-law for that. I would go to, so and so for that. If I were feeling depressed for no reason and feeling selfish, I would go to my friend Hannah. If I were feeling ugly and needed someone to tell me I was cute, like I'm gonna go to Sawyer. And so I just I think I used to really try to have like one person be all
Yeah.
of those things for me, and it's just too much to put on people, and my expectations of people are already high. And so while we're super lucky and we can be almost all of those things to each other all the time, um, realistically we can't, and we need other people for that. And so we've got, our parents for those other like life questions. We have
Mhm.
our church friends for the spiritual questions. We have our music friends for the music questions. And so I think, we don't have a ton of friends, uh, but I think it's just for me, it's been like, yes, find that person, but also pay that person and have them be your, like, have a therapist because that
Yes.
also really helps. And if you're lucky enough to, find a person to spend your life with, highly recommend. And if you're not there yet or you don't want that, then just, finding those people that you can go to for certain things, and really, really leaning into that and being open about that. Like me and my friend Hannah, we know like if you're feeling depressed and you want to say something that someone else would lock you up for, like you come to me first so that
Yeah.
so that you don't get locked up.
Yeah.
And just like, yeah, it comes with knowing yourself and knowing others and being really upfront with what you need, and just figuring out who to go for what, I guess, is where
Yeah.
I'm at with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, that made me think of a meme really fast too, which was when you talk about, messaging Hannah, the dark stuff. Um, there was a meme that I saw forever ago and it still makes me laugh. And it was, I didn't realize I was telling a traumatic story until nobody else in the room laughed. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh shit, like I've done that so many times where like
Same.
that was dark and I'm dying and people are like, you okay? Like, should we call
Yeah.
somebody?
And you need those people, right?
Right.
But you also need the person who's gonna be like, good one.
Yeah.
Like, fuck yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. So I've really enjoyed this talk. Obviously, you guys know I love you and we're definitely going to stay in touch and all of that. Um, but as we kind of transition for the final part, bringing it back to the music, obviously I'll link all the socials and stuff, but tell everybody all the things because you have new music to announce, you've got social medias you want them to follow, the whole nine.
Things. Obviously the TikTok is helpful, definitely may be banned. Instagram for shows, our website. We are writing a fuck ton, and we are going to release an EP in the next month. or sooner, with 2 new songs on it. And then we are in the midst of writing our first album. And it's gonna be a really wild year for definitely maybe. I'm super excited, but the main goal for us right now is just more music, release more music, get an album out, get 10 to 15 songs out, have a true catalog, something to put on a vinyl,
Yeah.
that's the goal. So that's where we're gonna be by the fall. We'll have our first album.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Like I said, I think hopefully this is, really helpful and impactful to the people that need to hear it, and honestly, maybe to the people that don't know that they need to hear it, in the sense that, like, they're not being mean, Sawyer, but they're the outside party, right? Like, they need to hear it so that they can help identify and see what's going on.
Or they will need it in the future.
Yeah, eventually,
Hopefully not.
unfortunately. So, but yeah, we'll definitely, like I said, stay in touch, because we always do. And
Yeah.
we'll awesome, guys. I appreciate it. I'm gonna jump into this other interview, but you guys know, I'm gonna blast you as much as I can. So
Thank you. Have fun. Good luck with your next interview.
thanks. See ya.
Bye.